This is My First Job in Sports, the show created to kickstart your journey toward a successful career in the sports industry. Presented by SBRnet, your comprehensive source for data focused on sports fans and more. Here's your host of My First Job in Sports, Neil Schwartz.
Welcome to this edition of My First Job in Sports, the show that provides a little bit of inspiration, navigation, and any other thing you could think of, motivation to help you get that all-important first job in sports. I'm here, of course, with my co-host, Dr. G, assistant professor from Temple University. Doc, how you doing?
I'm incredible. I just got back from seeing Beyonce 3 times in a row. I am
Really?
great. I am so inspired.
You're a Beyonce person, huh?
Stan, absolutely.
Wow. It's funny, I went to the NHL Stanley Cup final game last Thursday night. It was game 4. Of course, they lost because I was there. I'm like Captain
Obviously.
Dark Cloud. Yeah, what can I tell you? But apparently Taylor Swift was there because they must have shown her about 20 times.
Of course.
But what they also showed was the following day, she spent 4 hours at Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital, which, that to me, I love it when, stars, pop stars, icons, people like that can really, want to give back and want to do more than just, show up at fun events.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. That's a big piece of it. So love that.
Yeah, me too. Hey, this show's going to get a little bit sports tourism intensive. We're going to be speaking to Sallie Gordon, who is the CEO and founder of World Travel. I'll get this one wrong every time. World Sports Travel. Again, 3 of my favorite words. I probably said that a few times. Dr. G, you teach sports tourism, I know, at Temple. What are some of the trends and things that you're seeing, just out of curiosity?
The business is booming. And I'm so glad that we're teaching it because there's greater visibility now for students.
Yes.
And so we're saying, hey, you can work for the NGBs. You can work for these cities and their sports commissions. You can work in all of these areas and for these venues and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so, so we're just talking about how business is booming. Everyone doesn't have to try to be a GM. Everybody has to try to be an athletic director.
Not that many of those jobs around.
But there are so many sports tourism jobs. And so that's why we did this episode.
Yeah, no, it really is important. And I think one of the things I know that, we talk about all of the on-ramps. And that's really what's important is that if there's an on-ramp, you can get on the on-ramp and you can figure out how to make your way into that business. Every year SBRnet does a study of sports fandom. And for the last 3 years, we've asked questions focused on sports tourism. And we define sports tourism as those people that travel to participate in an event, people that travel to follow their favorite sports teams, but also like family that travel to support their family members. Well, in this year's study, we found that over 60 million sports fans are going to make some form of trip and, for one of those sports tourism type of objectives or tourism type of plans. I mean, it's literally almost 500 million incidents of people going out on, going away from home, either going to an event, participating in an event, or supporting one of their loved ones. And the interesting thing is that what's also interesting is that younger sports fans, Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, in that order, by the way, are really getting out there and, enjoying the opportunities that are presented from traveling for sports. So, let's get to our interview with Sallie Gordon and let's learn all about the sports tourism business. Sallie is CEO and owner of World Sports Travel. So frankly, we're talking about 3 of my most favorite subjects: world, sports, and travel. So Dr. Gordon, what we'd like to do is that, rather than having me go through your resume or bio and things like that, you go through your bio, you go through your resume, you go through your story, and then we'll keep it going from there.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show today. I'm looking forward to telling you a bit about myself and just kind of giving some advice to those people who are interested in getting into sports. A little bit about myself. So I grew up in a military brat. I went to undergrad at Georgetown College in Kentucky. I did business administration there. And then after that, I kind of was like, all right, what do I do? Don't know what I want to do. Decided to go get my sport administration master's at Georgia State. Great program, for anybody who's interested. Not to knock Temple or anything, but
you
Georgia
can
State
plug your school. It's okay.
Exactly. So Georgia State has a great sports program. So during my time there, kind of to go back a little bit, I was a student manager for the women's basketball team when I was an undergrad. Went to grad school, worked at Georgia Tech for a while. Kind of interesting how that worked out. But Georgia State has graduate assistantships with universities in the area. So mine was actually with Georgia Tech. So I worked in the marketing department there for a while. After that, I worked with the Women's Basketball Coaches Association as an intern. So that was a big job for me, because that was kind of where I knew this is what I want to do. And essentially, I was involved in their operations for their all-star basketball game, the high school all-star basketball game they had. So some of the notable people that I had in that game was like Brittany Griner, Skylar Diggins,
wow,
Lasia Clarendon. So just a couple of those names. So right there, that's when I knew I wanted to get into operations. That's when I knew that basketball was always a part of my life, but I wanted to continue that. So then I moved to Cleveland, was the director of women's basketball operations there for 3 years. Was kind of at the age, I was probably in my mid-20s, and was like, oh, what do I do now? I've been in basketball my whole life. Let me look at other options. And so I was trying to get out of women's basketball, but then got a call from of my former boss asking me to essentially be the head of their women's operations for their in-season tournaments and essentially international tours. So I worked there for 8 years with another company doing international tours. And then COVID happened. I decided after COVID, I needed more of a challenge. I thought I did everything I needed to do for that company. And so I decided to start World Sports Travel, and it's been going strong for 4 years as of next month. So I'm happy I did it, and looking forward to things to come.
What a journey. What a journey. What a journey. And before we get into your actual career, I want to go back to your college days, because although you didn't go to Temple,
everybody can't go to Temple.
Everybody can't go to Temple, but consider it. Shameless plug. But your experience kind of mirrors our program, because our program, we have those business foundational classes, and then we get into those sport management classes, and you got your undergraduate degree in business management. Correct. And then you went and got your master's in sport. And so can you just talk about, from your opinion, the value of getting that business foundation, getting those business classes in your arsenal for those operations roles that you were in?
I think it's important, because sports is the business. The goal in the end, we love sports, but we still got to pay the bills. We still got to make sure things flow, whether it's finance and trying to figure out accounting and how that works, but also operations. How can you properly organize events? How can you get out there for marketing, things like that? So it gave me a base for that. And then now you look at it from another standpoint of adding the sports to it. And so how can you take this business opportunity or this business idea and then make it apply it to sports? So that's kind of, the joys about, seeing business as a whole first. And then, okay, now I'm going and learning about it from sports-minded people who have worked in the field, and seeing how it applies and how things are similar and how things are different.
And then you also worked in operations for a long period of time. And
still working in operations,
yes. Right? Yes. Operations has been your life for a long time.
Yes.
And thinking back to your business classes in undergrad and your sport classes and your master's, what are some key classes do you think were important for an operations role? Which classes do you think really helped you and really still helps you to this day for operations, whether it's the business management classes or the sport administration classes?
Yeah, I think it was probably, it's interesting. So I took an event management class and I took a facility class. Those are probably two of the most interesting ones. obviously event management breaks down everything. But that was actually too, like, I was one of the projects that we had to do was, all right, put together an event. If I saw that project right now, I'd be like, Sallie, what the heck? But as you went through the class, you kind of learn things. And then also too, the firsthand experience helps too, because again, that's where I'm like, okay, wait, I would have done this differently, or this makes more sense now, or I didn't think of that when I was doing this project, because the in-field work is what really shows you the operational part of things. But doing like facility sites, so I took a facility class, and we would go around Atlanta and we would visit different facilities. So just seeing like things you don't think of, like how many bathrooms are there, how there's more women's bathrooms than men's bathrooms, like just, exits and setups and, am I following the laws? So like all of that comes in handy when you're doing operations, whether it's event operations, team operations, all of that comes in handy. So I think those are probably two classes that automatically pop up in my head.
You look at what you're, put on your bio to us, and you talk about event management, you talk about sports tourism, you talk about events, and I know these are all things that are really in Dr. G's wheelhouse, because I know the Temple School is about event management and sports tourism, and tell us a little bit about the variety of opportunities that are available for students just coming out of school, because I think many of them do not realize that there's just so many great places where they can start their career in sports tourism.
I think not even just sport tourism, but like in sports in general, like some things that I did while I was in school. I used to work for I can't think of the name right now, but there is a wheelchair basketball program that's out of Atlanta, and they did tournaments all over the country. That's a part of sport tourism. Whether it's youth, whether it's adult sports is starting to come off, and traveling that way. But think about like the WBCA, who their main thing is to do a coaches convention around the Final Four. Well, that's in a different city every year. So you actually have to take that standpoint too and say, all right, we're going to visit this year. We're going to visit that. There's a soccer convention that's actually in Philly probably every 4 years or so. That's another part of, it's still an event that moves from city to city. And then you have, again, Final Four, championships, all of that. You can work in a conference, but still your conference championships are in different cities, and you have to take in consideration the tourism part of things. Like, how am I going to get the fans there? Do I need to help dealing with the hotels, all of that?
And all of that is ops, like you said, Sallie. And Neil talked about how, in our department, we marry sport, tourism, hospitality, events, all of that. And oftentimes students come in like, hey, I want to do this, and that, but they don't really think about sport tourism. And so can you talk about just why sports tourism, for the students to understand why should sports tourism be a path that they consider going down?
Yeah, I think for me, I've appreciated and enjoyed the travel part of it, and then now I'm taking something that I have dealt with my whole entire life and played basketball and all of that, and combined it with travel and the people you meet, the situations you're put in. I have to know how to handle Portuguese people, Greek people, Italian people, different personalities, things like that. So I think it's important. I think, and it's something that's not going away. Sport tourism is not. You have the Olympics.
It's growing.
It's growing. It's growing.
Last time I checked, when I looked at the financial impact study of sports tourism, and this might have been 3 years ago, but it was like a $30 billion industry. That's billion with a B, and growing. And and every year, we do an annual study of sports fandom. We ask about sports travel and sports tourism, and guess what? It's growing. Whether people are traveling for participating in sports, whether they're traveling to support their families, their children, or whether traveling even to go to follow their favorite team.
There's people who do hiking tourism, and there's a company that does that. All right, we want to go whitewater rafting. Let's all go to Croatia and do it here. It's every aspect, and it's not just your mainstream sports. I think that's important to realize, like, as a student, I had the vision of, all right, I wanted to be part of the NCAA. I wanted to be in the head office. You think of the big programs. But then as I went in grad school, I learned about all the small programs that were there, all of that still did big things that they just may not be on everybody's TV. But I think that's important to understand that, like, there's so many small companies and people and other opportunities that you don't want to overlook, because, I had no idea that you asked me 10 years ago, or actually probably 15 years ago, that I would be doing this job. Never thought of it. So,
and I'm sure students are just like you, because you're not just working in sport tourism, you created your business.
Yep.
And when students think about their careers in sport tourism events, they often think, I want to work for the Lakers, Eagles, D1, college football. I want to work for somebody else.
Yeah.
But you said, I want to work for myself. I want to be an entrepreneur.
Yep.
So can you talk about the journey to entrepreneurship?
Yeah. It's still a journey. I have battles, but I have, things I have to deal with every day. I've been reminded of my hate for accounting that I had when I was in undergrad. Exactly. I had a teacher who was trying to get me to major in accounting, and I was like, no. And so I've been reminded of that. But I think when I started the company, I wanted a challenge. I worked for a company where I was doing great. I was selling, all our events were full. We were increasing every summer on how many teams we were having travel. And I think it just came to a point where I had to look at myself, look at my path to happiness, not necessarily to happiness, but continued happiness. And I felt like it was time. I did what I was supposed to do. And it was time for me to challenge myself. And so then after a long talk with Mom, and her encouragement and just saying, do it. I believe in you. And that's always, I think the people in your corner always matter too.
Always.
But she pushed me to do it, and it was great. The first summer we had 6 groups. The second summer we had 13 groups. Last summer we had 12. So we're continuously, trying to add different sports. Took an ice hockey team, had a wrestling team in May. Most of the stuff I did was basketball. So now I'm like, okay, talking to a couple of lacrosse teams, talking to some soccer teams, trying to widen our horizon. But as a business owner, I find challenges every day. One of the biggest things I have to deal with now is NIL. Did I ever think I had to deal with NIL? But it affects my business in the sense that, especially D1 schools having less money. So it's just like you have challenges every day, but I enjoy it, and it's something that I'm built for. So,
one of the things about being in operations and also running events and kind of being where the rubber meets the road, as I like to say, means you've got to be a good problem solver. Because you just got to be a good problem solver. Let me ask you this. So when you were back in school and, you were, taking these different courses and all that, is there any skill or is there any specific course that you found, has been really helpful to you, now that you own your own business? I know I have a couple of things that have helped me. Yeah. And I even quote some of the things I learned, which makes me sad at sometimes, but that's okay.
I think I don't want to take your answer, but the problem solving thing is a big deal, especially in any events, because
talk about it.
You have to think quickly, not quickly. Some situations I say, like, an email may come to me and they say, okay, here's our problem. Mm-hmm. Do I need to respond right now? No, let it settle. Let me see what happens. Let me weigh my options, mm-hmm. and then pros, cons of each situation. Then also too, it's the ability to act quickly, to adjust quickly, and make decisions, and being proud of the decision you made, knowing you did everything to make the right decision.
Sure.
And sometimes, I'm like, maybe I could have done it this way, or I could have done it that way. But being able to think quick is I think big in sport management, but in event management, you're always getting problems. You're always getting things that pop up that you did not expect. And so whether it's I have a couple hours to decide, I have 2 days to decide, I have 3 days to decide, I have
how about 2 minutes?
10 minutes, you know, like sometimes you got to think quickly. You know, I had an issue with a flight once with the team and I was like, oh crap, I didn't have time to think. I got in the car. I went to the airport ahead of time, figured it out. The group was fine. Everybody got on the flight. We were good. I had to think quickly. I didn't have time to, you know, do the woe is me. Oh my God, you know, I just want to eat breakfast. No, I say there's no breakfast. We're getting to go, you know, things like that. So I think that's a skill that I appreciate in whether it's an intern or an employee, somebody who can think quickly and also analyze a situation when you have the time to and look at the different options that you have and try to make the right choice.
And because students have to develop those skills, that skill set of problem solving and putting out fires and things like that, seeing that sport tourism is niche, where are some areas or how can students go to try to get some sport tourism experience or exposure before they enter into their full-time role? Because, you know, maybe they don't have to actually get a sport tourism internship. Maybe they can develop those skills elsewhere. So what's your recommendation for students that I think you may have sold already on sport tourism?
I think especially if you're in a big city, especially in Philly or, you know, Atlanta, you're going to get events in there all the time. And that's part of sport tourism. You're getting events that aren't there yearly. You get some that are there yearly. But going there and volunteering and saying, okay, how can I help you? Is there anything you need? And then you can kind of see how things are run. You can kind of see problems that have come about. You're not dealing with in one hand because usually the volunteers don't unless they really, really trust you. But you can kind of, all right, oh, so that happened. This is what they did to fix it. Oh, you know, the scoreboard went out. You know, how did they do that? Oh, there's a backup scoreboard? I didn't know there was a backup scoreboard.
Backup
what
generator?
About when the shot clocks go out? Oh, there's one that you can roll in that are on the floor. Like just like things that people don't notice. And you can just notice this stuff by sitting at an event. I cannot go to an event and not and focus on the actual event because I'm too busy looking around. I'm like, where did this lady come from? Like, oh, this marketing person's over here. And so she comes over, oh, she does this. Oh, that's my brain. That's why I can't enjoy events anymore. Because I don't even look at them anymore. But I think when you go to events, look at things that way. Like, look at, So when do they throw the t-shirts out? You know, like how do they, you know, when does the dance crew come out? Like all of that's part of like this master event, whether it's an AAU tournament, a basketball game. But I think volunteering and just getting experience is probably a big part as far as getting those skills to, you know, think quickly and get into tourism or sport tourism without actually having an internship directly with a company.
You know, one of the things, you know, as I become more and more involved in sports tourism, and I have, is that there are probably more, you know, on-ramps to the sports tourism side of our business than any other single aspect. And here's why. Number one, every city has a convention and visitors bureau, and most of them have something called a sports commission. And you'd be surprised, small cities have sports commissions, and they're the groups that are responsible for bringing events into that city or town. But then you've got the event promoters, you know, the AAU, the various NGBs. You've got all these people that are putting on these events. And then you've got the facilities management side. You know, where are they holding these events? You know, and then you've got the logistics side. Excuse me, moving people from point A to point B, making sure they're all fed. So there's just so many on-ramps into sports tourism.
Correct. I ran a lot of, with the last company I worked for, I ran a lot of tournaments in Las Vegas and stuff like that. And so we had an intern, and the intern, her job was to handle all the buses. And so that's another part, you know, like you don't think about, you know, how are we getting the teams from point A to point B? how are we, shuttling them back and forth to practices, games, activities around Las Vegas. So it's almost so many different parts of it. Like you just don't see going to an event,
Sure. We're speaking with Sallie Gordon, CEO and owner of World Sports Travel. Again, those are like 3 words that I just happen to love. Let me ask you a question. And I know this might be putting you on the spot a little bit, Sallie, but what you had to have an epic fail somewhere along the line. Any chance you want to cop to the worst of the epic fails?
I get that. I believe it or not, I get this question a lot. And I can't really think of too many that like, I was like, oh my God. Again, I had an issue with a team flight. And there's a good chance we were going to miss the flight.
Right.
And so I went up there. I woke up, I rushed to the airport, went there, said, hey, we're having bus issues. They're coming. And so I'm sitting there and I'm talking to this lady and I'm like giving her updates. And so she pretty much says, all right, we're going to have a line here. We're going to get you guys through. So we had we had a line only for the group. They were ready for us. They knew they were coming and we made it barely, but they made it. Every bag made it back to the U.S., everything. So it was
this was international even. Ooh.
This was international.
Oof.
It was international. So it was more of I can sit there and be like, oh, we need to get this bus fixed. Or I could be like, all right, let me go ahead and figure out what I can do. Because I can't fix a bus.
Sure.
I can't do that. But I can make sure that I talk to the people on this flight and say, we're coming. We just try to get everybody here. And so that's probably one of the ones that really was like, oh, what am I going to do if we don't? Like the coach was like, so what if we don't make the flight? I said, that's not what I'm thinking about right now. I'm trying to think of how to get you on the flight. We'll talk about what happens if you don't make the flight when you don't make it, if you don't make it. But right now you're going to get on this flight. And so she had no more questions for me. I think probably it wasn't to say an epic fail, but I think one of the big challenges of what I do is dealing with different types of people, different coaches, things like that. So I have to adjust myself to each coach that I deal with. What do they want? What do they need? How do I deal with them? When they don't trust me, because sometimes I'm taking their team on an international tour. And not that they don't trust me, but sometimes some coaches are like, wait, okay, so this is, are you saying it's going to take 15 minutes to get here? You're to say it's going to take 30 minutes. I'm like, trust me, I got you. Like, we're not going to be late, are we? Things like that. So it's just like dealing with each coach differently as well.
You just gave us your epic fail. Now give us your best success story. If you're going to go one way, I got to let you go the other.
That wasn't a fail. That was actually a success.
Okay. Turning.
I put those together because
that's good.
It was a miracle we got on that flight. It was a miracle we got on that flight. That's a success. How
about weather? Weather plays such a big part of a lot of these events. I mean, I was watching the last round of the U.S. Open on Sunday, and it was pouring. And you see some of these events, and the weather just, does not cooperate. Mother Nature does not cooperate.
Thankfully, I do a lot of indoor situations, but you'd be surprised what I have to deal with. I used to run tournaments in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
Hurricanes. We had to move it once because of a hurricane. We had a game canceled last summer because of the wildfires in Greece.
Wow.
So these are some things that happen. I have to tell coaches this happens. Like, nobody can get mad at me because the game got canceled because of wildfire.
They could, but they wouldn't be right.
Exactly. But, explaining, dealing with things like that, you're in a foreign country, you deal with a lot of different people, the way they do work, the way they communicate. So, yeah.
First of all, Neil, I love the question about the failures because we all fail. And I feel like students are fearful of failure. But the thing is, we all fail, and look at Sallie now. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why I love that question. Yeah.
We all make mistakes. It just happens,
But it's all about how we bounce back. It's about resilience.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because the way I guess an epic fail, I don't see how it's an epic fail, but I get a lot of no's. I do a lot of selling. That's another part of my job is I sell because I have to convince these teams why they should come with me. But I had a team once that I swear to God, I put all my time and effort in getting this team to go on a tour, and they decided to go with somebody else.
Ooh.
And it broke me.
Nice.
And I get a lot of no's, but for some reason, this one broke me. And I said, it's all right, because in 4 years, I'm going to get this team. And I still communicate with the coach. Good job, nice season, like stayed in touch with them and end up 4 years later, end up getting the trip. So it is important about how you bounce back.
Sure.
Things are going to happen. You're going to get a lot of no's.
You bet.
You're going to get a lot of no's on a lot of things you do. And I think bouncing back is a big part about it.
Yeah, Sallie, at this year's Get in the Game event, November 7th through 9th in Baltimore, which is actually where I met Dr. G last year, we're going to really focus heavily on the sports tourism side of the sports business. In fact, we're going to do a pre-event event. I know it sounds kind of goofy, but we're actually going to have an opportunity for students to interact with, both event promoters, facility managers and facility owners, and all the different variables that go into sports travel. So from our standpoint and my standpoint, I am 100%, in favor of, the sports travel as a great place for students to get that first job in tours. But let me ask you the key question. Student walks up to you at my first job in sports on November the 7th on Friday. And, he doesn't know or she doesn't know that much about sports tourism. What are you going to tell him or her about the opportunities?
There's a lot of them. There's a lot of different sports. Everybody, they have senior ages that they have senior games. They have the doctor games in Europe.
Sure.
I mean, there's so many opportunities that you would not even imagine. If it's something you really, really want to get into, there's a lot of opportunities. Take that opportunity. If you get a chance, take it. Learn as much as you can. Learn organizational skills. Learn how to pay attention to details. But there's so many opportunities. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. If you are a basketball person, try tennis. You can still work for a tennis company. You can still work for a hockey company or a baseball company or any other sport. There's some people specialize in certain sports, and some people do a lot of different sports. So I think it's about thinking outside the box and seeing an opportunity.
Pickleball. Fastest growing sport right now in the nation. These events are just showing up out of everywhere. And
there's like seniors that are playing them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's other sports, that have really upped their game with respect to sports. Cricket, lacrosse has always been pretty active, but there's that new version. I don't call it a version of pickleball, but it's called padel, I think, where it's similar. It kind of marries pickleball and I'm not sure how to explain it. What's that?
Netball?
No, right. I didn't even think of that one.
And that's like a big sport in Australia, Right. The crowds for netball is crazy, So, I think just that's one thing. I remember being in grad school, and we would get emails about opportunities, internships, graduate assistantships. And I was like, oh, what's this business? I've never heard about it. And I would Google it, and I would be like, oh, that's cool. What's this business? And that's kind of like just being open, everybody can't work for the Atlanta Hawks. Everybody can't work for the Falcons or the Green Bay Packers. I'm in Wisconsin right now, so
I understand.
or the Bucks. So
Dr. G, what did one of our previous guests say? Just say yes, right? Wasn't that her?
Say yes.
Wasn't that her motto?
Say yes. Be open. Say yes.
Say yes.
Say yes. And so I'm going to ask you another Get in the Game question.
Ooh.
Okay. Shameless plug. So let's say it's November 9th, the last day of the Get in the Game conference. They've heard everything about sport tourism.
Okay.
And they may be a little discouraged. They may be a senior, about to go and try to get an internship for their second semester, or they're trying to enter into the industry.
Right.
Would you be able to, not would you be able to, but can you give them a piece or a word of encouragement for their journey? Because just through looking at your journey, it's very clear from the business degree to the sport degree to the internships, everything worked together to lead you to where you are today.
Yes.
So do you have a piece of encouragement that you can prepare right now for November 9th for a student that's a little discouraged and they need some encouragement?
Actually, I'm going to need her, I think, for November 8th, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Oh, yes. You're going to get a lot of no's. I mean, I remember graduating grad school and being in my mom's house just every day, applying for jobs. I didn't have enough experience. They wanted somebody that already had experience. I mean, I was getting rejected for jobs that were like $23,000 a year. I was like, wait, but I'm good. Like, I know what I'm doing. I could be real. Like, it just became like another job of me applying for jobs. And then I accepted a temporary position with the Atlanta Dream. One of their, like, the administrative assistant for the president was getting a major surgery. So somebody from the WBCA said, Sallie, how do you feel about doing this for 4 weeks? You know, I'm like, oh, that's fine. You know, just go in there. While I'm looking for jobs, I have something, I meet some people. The vice president was a former director of basketball operations. So when I applied for the Cleveland State job, they saw that I worked for Atlanta Dream and called her because their current double had been trained by her.
Wow. And
it shows you two things. One, if it's something small, don't pass it up. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know. I'm not going to say don't pass it up, but if it feels right and you think you can do it at that time, because, you know, everybody's situation is different, then do it. You know, don't focus on the why nots. Think of more of the whys. And then two, also use your network. You know, I didn't have no idea of this connection. And if I did, I would have probably went to her first chance. But I stayed afterwards sometimes in the office and just said, hey, do you need anything? Do you have anything to do? And so she was like, yeah, you can help me with this, or how about this? And I would just talk to her, not knowing that she was going to get a call 2 weeks that I didn't even facilitate or have anything to do with. So I think it's just being open-minded, hanging in there, because you'll get your opportunity.
Sure.
You gotta stick with it. I mean, again, I felt like I had two jobs: one, working for Atlanta Dream, and two, applying for jobs. And I was like, I don't understand. If I can't get, there was one job I remember I got denied for, and I was like, if I can't get that job, Jesus, you know. So, and I ended up actually getting a better job that paid more, that was in a better city. This one was like in a really small town and like North Carolina. It was closer to home, but it's still, I still like the big cities. So, sometimes you get no's so that you can get a yes later.
You know what? Dr. G and I, first of all, want to thank Sallie Gordon, president and CEO and owner of World Sports Travel, for coming on My First Job in Sports today. I felt that, you know, your journey and also your experiences have been really enlightening, and I think will be really good, you know, for the students that do watch the show. I do have one quick question. When a student comes up to you, or anyone comes up to you, you only have one chance to make a first impression. What makes a first impression on Sallie Gordon?
Ooh.
Sorry to put you on the spot, Sal.
No, it's really hard for me to say that, because, you know, I'm just more about being yourself. You know, I'm more of like, just be yourself. I'm just Sallie. Don't try to do all this stuff to impress me. Don't try to, you know, be somebody you're not. Be yourself. You know, one thing that it's kind of sometimes hard to do, but if you see an opportunity, introduce yourself to somebody.
Sure.
And again, I think if you're genuine and you're being yourself, that should all that matter. But I think one thing that I think helps, if you know that you're going to an event and X, Y, and Z are going to be there, do your research. There might be a connection. You know, somebody might say, oh, you know, you went to Georgetown College. I'm from Kentucky. I'm like, you are? You know, it's just that. Like, you just never know what connection you have. And that necessarily doesn't mean you always have to find a connection, because you don't want to push it if it's not there. But I think the big part is just about just being yourself.
Do your homework. I think that's the one message that I got. Hey, Dr. G, and I want to thank Sallie Gordon, President and CEO. I keep getting that wrong, by the way. Owner and CEO of World Sports Travel. Hey, the sports tourism business is a great place to start your career in sports. And Sallie is someone that can really provide you with a lot of interesting information, knowledge, and what it takes to get that first job in sports. Sallie, thanks for coming on today.
No problem.
Thank you
for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to My First Job in Sports. This show has been produced by Brad Mabey. Back episodes can be found at sportsmarketanalytics.com, on the SBRnet YouTube channel, or all major podcast platforms. If you like the show, give us a great review. Also, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, or X.